Welcome everyone to Visionaries Talk Back. I am Shannon Spruill, your host. I am an author and CEO of SMS Right On Publishing. Today I'm excited to have as a guest Jeffrey Davis. I'm going to read your bio and then I'm going to bring him in and we're just going to have a great conversation today. Jeffrey Davis has an extensive professional background, having been in the work world since the early 1970s. His career accomplishments include serving as law enforcement officer in the Lenexa, Kansas, and Fort Worth, Texas, working in the defense industry for Boeing and Lockheed Martin, consulting as an independent management training and leadership development specialist, and working as an administrator in the field of higher education and post-secondary education institutes. Jeff has earned his Master's of Education in the field of counseling psychology and has taught classes in numerous disciplines of psychology. Since authoring the first edition of The Shadow of Evil, Where is God in a Violent World, Jeff has traveled extensively across the country to present to survivors groups, including bereaved survivors of homicide, parents of murdered children, National Organization for Victim Assistance, and the Help Each Other Spiritually. Jeff has a passion for victims in their unique circumstances, so he shares his own personal story of the loss of his mother to the B.T.K serial killer as a means of building a connection between other survivors and himself. As it enters its second edition, Jeff hopes that his book will continue to provide comfort and solace to anyone who has suffered loss and heartache in their lives. His message is simple. No matter how overwhelming the pain today, there is a road to emotional and spiritual recovery, and therefore cause for hope after all. Jeff is semi-retired and currently lives with his wife, Moni, and their faithful schnauzer, Paxton, in Greenlee, Colorado. Please welcome Jeffrey Davis. Jeffrey, are you there? Okay, give me 1 second. So let everyone know, if you have any questions, please in the comment section, post your questions, and please share this video. I think Jeff is going to share with us some very important information today. So share, and please feel free to ask questions of Jeff as we have this conversation. Jeff, I'm just going to start off by asking you, can you share with the audience, tell us about your book and tell us about your story?
Well, basically, yes. There, better? All right. Having lost my mother to the B.T.K serial killer, well, that devastated me. And in the process of going through the recovery, it just occurred to me that I probably should share my message with other people who would benefit from that, because not everybody's lost somebody to violence, but we've all experienced grief, tragedy, loss, of one form or another. And I tried to examine the subject from a Christian perspective and used references to the scriptures, to the Bible, to explain my experience. And I hope in the process of explaining my experience, put it out there in a way that people that read it will say, wow, I've been there. I understand that. That's exactly what I was thinking and feeling. And I've had countless people tell me that after reading the book. It's like, wow, it's like I was right there with you. So that's kind of become my mission in life, is to get it out there for the sake of all those, for the tribute to my mom.
And what inspired you to share such a personal story?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I'm really more of a private person than I am an open person. And I know you've read it, Shannon, started reading it. I shared an awful lot of very personal thoughts, but I felt like I felt like I was obligated, because I could talk about it. I could write it.
Yes, I did.
That was my purpose, I guess, at that point. I was willing to expose some of those personal feelings for the sake of trying to demonstrate to the reader that I could understand what they had been. But it wasn't easy.
And I can imagine that that was very difficult for you to open up and share such a personal story. Can you tell us what message do you want people to get from reading your book?
Well, excuse me, as you know, I take them down a long, lonely, desperate road to, the brink of emotional oblivion. But that certainly isn't the end of the story. I'm simply describing what I went through to get to that point. And then the message, the hope that I want to leave with people, and that's what the second half of the book is about, is where I help people understand, I hope, that yes, we can be practically on the threshold of hell emotionally, but even that, we can still claim hope and claim restoration and claim recovery and come back to an emotional focus that has a sense of hope for the future. So, in other words, no matter how bleak the circumstances are or have been, that doesn't mean we have to stay there emotionally. We can begin to crawl out of that place of desperation with a light of hope at the end of the tunnel. That's really the message. Despair to hope. It's a long road. It's a tough road. It's a very, very difficult road, but it doesn't have to end in despair. We can live and recover and have a sense of hope and a renewed sense of who we are and move forward in spite of all that.
Okay. I'm going to ask you something. Can you walk us through the day that you got the news that they had discovered your mother's body?
Yeah, excuse me. Yes. Bear in mind, we had waited 13 days. No news. My sister and I both decided we had to fly back to Wichita and be there physically with eyes on.
What emotions did you experience?
There was just this pending sense of doom when we first got there, because I knew as an ex-law enforcement officer, after 13 days, the chances were she was gone, as in dead. And I had tried to accept that, but you never do until it's upon you. So I had a sense of dread, a sense of despair, I guess. And ironically, and I'm not sure it was coincidental, but that very day, we were with the sheriff's officer in the bank, my mom's safe deposit box, when his people went off to notify him that they had found her body. Now, I didn't know that at the time. I surmised that's what it was. But it wasn't until about midnight that night before they actually identified her body and confirmed it. At that point, that was the lowest point of my life ever. And it was just filled with despair, helplessness, every negative emotion, anguish. There was such a mix of emotions that I would just say it's the blackest point of my entire life. There was just nothing but emotional chaos.
Did your experience in law enforcement help you with dealing with your mother's death?
Yeah, I think it did. For one thing, the sheriff's officers were real good with me because they knew I'd been in the work, and so they were pretty sympathetic. But it also gave me a sense of how the process works, and of course it cemented my already dread that she was gone, that she was dead that night probably. So I had to carry that around with me. But yeah, in terms of my relations with the law enforcement people and in terms of how the process worked, I think it helped me be more prepared and have a better understanding of what we were going through, because I realize a lot of people that have never been involved in law enforcement, they're totally lost, they're totally panicked, because they've never been there before, so they don't know what to expect. It's probably pretty terribly difficult for them. I empathize with them.
Welcome everyone to Visionaries Talk Back. I'm Shannon Spool, your host. I am an author and CEO of SMS Writer on Publishing. Today I'm excited to have as a guest Jeffrey Davis. I'm going to read your bio and then I'm going to bring him in and we're just going to have a great conversation today. Jeffrey Davis has an extensive professional background, having been in the work world since the early 1970s. His career accomplishments include serving as law enforcement officer in the Lenexa, Kansas, and Fort Worth, Texas, working in the defense industry for Boeing and Lockheed Martin, consulting as an independent management training and leadership development specialist, and working as an administrator in the field of higher education and post-secondary education institutes. Jeff has earned his Master's of Education in the field of counseling psychology and has taught classes in numerous disciplines of psychology. Since authoring the first edition of The Shadow of Evil, Where is God in a Violent World, Jeff has traveled extensively across the country to present to survivors groups, including bereaved survivors of homicide, parents of murdered children, National Organization for Victim Assistance, and the Help Each Other Spiritually. Jeff has a passion for victims in their unique circumstances, so he shares his own personal story of the loss of his mother to the B.T.K serial killer as a means of building a connection between other survivors and himself. As it enters its second edition, Jeff hopes that his book will continue to provide comfort and solace to anyone who has suffered loss and heartache in their lives. His message is simple. No matter how overwhelming the pain today, there is a road to emotional and spiritual recovery, and therefore cause for hope after all. Jeff is semi-retired and currently lives with his wife, Moni, and their faithful schnauzer, Paxton, in Greenlee, Colorado. Please welcome Jeffrey Davis. Jeffrey, are you there?
I'm here, thank you.
Okay, give me 1 second.
That was a very nice intro. Basically, it just confirms that I've been around my whole
Okay. Hold on 1 second. I just want to make sure I got the volume right because I can't hear you that well.
It won't help to turn on.
Can you turn yours? Let me see if you adjust your volume a little bit, if we can hear you a little better.
I can hear you better.
Okay. Make sure. Okay. All right, we're going to go on. So let everyone know. If you have any questions, please, in the comment section, post your questions, and please share this video. I think Jeff is going to share with us some very important information today. So share, and please feel free to ask questions of Jeff as we have this conversation. Jeff, I'm just going to start off by asking you, can you share with the audience, tell us about your book and tell us about your story?
Well, the book came about as a result, as you mentioned in my intro, of having lost my mother as the last victim of the B.T.K serial murderer in January of '91. And from that, and the lowest point of my life, a few years down the line, I recognized that I probably should have addressed that. So I took it revolves around my mom's lowest point of my life. Down the line, I recognized that I probably should have addressed that. So I took it revolves around my mom's lowest point of my life. Through the process, I'd like to share that with my readers in terms of the story was unique to me, yes, but the whole life of grief, suffering, violence, loss of life, general.
Hey, Jeff. I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm getting some comments back from our audience that your volume is very low.
Okay. Well, let's try this then. No, let me turn it up. Is this better?
Jeff, don't mean to interrupt you. I'm getting some comments back from our audience that your volume is very low. It looks like it's a little better. Can it go any louder?
Yeah. How's that? Is that better?
It looks like it's a little better. Can it go any louder? Still a little low. Can it get any louder? Because I can hear you, but it's still low.
Yeah, I'll turn it all the way up, but then when one of you talks, I'm going to have to turn it down. It's going to blow me off my chair.
Still a little low. Can it get any louder? Because I can hear you, but it's still low. Oh, you almost had it.
That's max. That's my max volume. Shannon, let me look around here. Let me see if there's something I can fix. Hold on.
Okay, we can hear you now.
All right. There we go. Sorry. Is that better? Is that better?
Okay, we're patient. Okay, we can hear you now.
Is this better?
That's better.
I think I was too far away from the mic.
Yes, it is.
All right. Okay. Let's see. We were talking. Basically, you wanted to kind of.
Yes, it is.
Of the book.
Yes, it is. Okay.
You ready?
All right, so let's try to start over. And if you can share with the audience about your book and your story.
Well,
yes.
There, better? All right. Having lost my mother to the B.T.K. serial killer, well, that devastated me. And in the process of going through the recovery, it just occurred to me that I probably should share my message with people who would benefit from that, because not everybody's lost somebody to violence, but we've all experienced grief, tragedy, loss, of one form or another. And I tried to examine the subject from a Christian perspective and used references to the scriptures, to the Bible, to explain my experience. And I hope in the process of explaining my experience, put it out there in a way that people that read it will say, wow, I've been there. I understand that. That's exactly what I was thinking and feeling. And I've had countless people tell me that after reading the book. It's like, wow, it's like I was right there with you. So that's kind of become my mission in life, is to get it out there for the sake of all those, for the tribute to my mom.
Okay. And what inspired you to share such a personal story?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I'm really more of a private person than I am an open person. And I know you've read it, Shannon. Started reading it. I've shared an awful lot of very personal thoughts, but I felt like I felt like I was obligated because I could talk about it. I could write it.
Yes, I did.
That was my purpose, I guess, at that point. I was willing to expose some of those personal feelings for the sake of trying to demonstrate to the reader that I could understand what they had been. But it wasn't easy.
Okay. And I can imagine that was very difficult for you to open up and share such a personal story. Can you tell us what message do you want people to get from reading your book?
Well, excuse me, as you know, I take them down a long, lonely, desperate road to, the brink of emotional oblivion. But that certainly isn't the end of the story. I'm simply describing what I went through to get to that point. And then the message, the hope that I want to leave with people, and that's what the second half of the book is about, is where I help people understand, I hope, that yes, we can be practically on the threshold of hell emotionally, but even that, we can still claim hope and claim restoration and claim recovery and come back to an emotional focus that has a sense of hope for the future. So in other words, no matter how bleak the circumstances are or have been, that doesn't mean we have to stay there emotionally. We can begin to crawl out of that place of desperation with a light of hope at the end of the tunnel. That's really the message. Despair, hope. It's a long road. It's a tough road. It's a very, very difficult road, but it doesn't have to end in despair. We can live and recover and have a sense of hope and a renewed sense of who we are and move forward in spite of all that.
Okay. I'm going to ask you something. Can you walk us through the day that you got the news that they had discovered your mother's body?
Yeah, excuse me. Yes. Bear in mind, we had waited 13 days. No news. So my sister and I both decided we had to fly back to Wichita to be there physically with eyes on.
What emotions did you experience?
There was just this pending sense of doom when we first got there, because I knew as an ex-law enforcement officer, after 13 days, the chances were she was gone, as in dead. And I had tried to accept that, but you never do until it's upon you. So I had a sense of dread, a sense of despair, I guess. And ironically, and I'm not sure it was coincidental, but that very day, we were with the sheriff's officer in the bank, my mom's safe deposit box, when his people went off to notify him that they had found her body. Now, I didn't know that at the time. I surmised that's what it was. But it wasn't until about midnight that night before they actually identified her body and confirmed it. At that point, that was the lowest point of my life ever. And it was just filled with despair, hopelessness, helplessness, every negative emotion, anguish. There was such a mix of emotions that I would just say it's the blackest point of my entire life. There was just nothing but emotional chaos.
Wow. Did your experience in law enforcement help you with dealing with your mother's death?
Yeah, I think it did. For one thing, the sheriff's officers were real good with me because they knew I'd been in the work, and so they were pretty sympathetic. But it also gave me a sense of how the process works, and of course, it cemented my already dread that she was gone, that she was dead that night, probably. So I had to carry that around with me. But yeah, in terms of my relations with the law enforcement people and in terms of how the process worked, I think it helped me be more prepared and have a better understanding of what we were going through. Because I realize a lot of people that have never been involved in law enforcement, they're totally lost, they're totally panicked, because they've never been there before, so they don't know what to expect. And it's probably pretty terribly difficult for them. I empathize with them.
Okay. During any of the court proceedings, did you attend any of them? And if you did, describe to me what you felt when you came face to face with your mother's murderer.
I didn't make the preliminary hearing where he entered the plea. I missed that. But I had intended all along to go to the sentencing. There wasn't a trial since he pled guilty. There was just a hearing, which turned out to be a 3-day court proceeding. So I didn't see him the first time purposely. I did see him the second time. I was totally prepared for it, as much as I could be. Had my victim's impact statement sharpened, razor sharp, and was ready to, let him hear that. But when I first stepped in there and saw him, revulsion, disgust, not good thoughts.
I can imagine.
Well, yeah, I'm looking at the animal that killed my mother, and he's still sitting there reeking of arrogance. And so it was very difficult. I stared him down the whole first morning. Somebody told me probably better knock it off because I was making him nervous. So I did. But I stayed. He felt my presence. Let's just say he felt me. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty bad.
Okay. Fast forward, how did your faith play a role in your grieving process?
Well, bear in mind that first several years, my faith just about was extinguished. I was about as close to walking away from it as I've ever been, because I wasn't mad. And I really think the readers can relate to this. I really do, because this is the crux of part of my message. I wasn't mad at God that he let my mother die, because I know that, God's given us the gift of free will, and we can use that for the most beautiful things, or we can use it for the most perverse. So I get that part of the equation. But what I had an issue with him, God, was he wouldn't give me the answers that I felt like I had coming. Now, do I have any answers coming, and does God owe me anything? We know the answer is, of course, silly. No, of course not. Yeah. But in that state of emotion, and I mean, I was desperate, despair, helpless, hopeless. So in that state of mind, I felt like I was rightfully within my rights to demand that he give me my answers. But then as I began to soften and I started looking at my faith and going back, I didn't give up on it. I threatened to give up on it, but I didn't. But I kept going back, and I'd read my verses, and I'd go to church, I'd hear the message. And eventually is when I got to the point which we were talking about earlier, where, well, look, there's other people can relate to what I'm going through. Maybe I need to share that out there with people. That's when I started the book. And then once I started the book, even though I hadn't bottomed out yet, I still had enough faith to keep me going and to not turn my back on God, which I threatened to do many times. So I think the thing that probably maybe was my lifeline was that I got that through my faith. I think I got a better perspective of what was really going on. In other words, I knew I was in the midst of a battle for my spiritual, emotional survival, but I had enough faith in me that I realized if I didn't give up, I could keep a perspective of some degree of hope at some point in time. So I think it kind of strengthened my perspective so that I could continue to hold on to the faith even though it was shaken. I just knew that I couldn't give up on it. I just knew that I had to keep walking forward. And then gradually as time moved on, again, my perspective, some of the fog cleared, some of the overwhelming feelings of all negative sorts, those began to lift a little bit. So again, I could work on getting a more positive perspective and an understanding, like Viktor Frankl wrote about 50, 60 years ago. We can't control what hits our lives, but we have every control over what we do with that experience. And basically, part of my message in the book is, in this recovery process, from whatever the tragedy, violence, or whatever, at some point we come to a fork in the road, and that fork in the road says, I'm either going to continue going down, down, down to oblivion, or I'm going to say, I'm not going to live like this forever. I can't. I'm going to move on. I'm going to move on in the spirit of my mother. I'm going to move on in the spirit of what she would want me to do. I'm moving forward even today, 27 years later, moving forward in part because I owe that to her, and to do anything less would make her death absolutely in vain, and I would die before I would let that happen. That's why I'm trying to get the word out to as many people as I can, because I think through sharing her story and how I experienced it, there are just so many people out there hurting people that, I mean, like your story is different than mine, and I know you lost your son through, I believe, correct. That's grief, that's adversity, that's tragedy of the highest order. I mean, yeah, my mother was murdered. That's pretty awful. They're all awful. Anytime it's about as awful as it gets, and you're never the same. You will never be the same.
Never the same, absolutely.
But, and that's what I tried to put in my victim's impact statement. We can move forward. We can make the choice. I will not go down. I will not lose my faith. I will not lose my family. I will not lose myself, a sense of self. I can move forward positively and progressively. And yeah, I'm scarred and I'm beaten and I'm bruised and won't ever be the same. But for her sake, and well, at least in terms of the book, for the people that read it, that's my mission, is to move forward with my life in that context so that he didn't win and I didn't lose her for no reason.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely understandable. Let me ask you a question. In your book, you talk about the anger, you talk about how you felt at the time, and which is very understandable. This man took your mother's life. So I can only imagine the anger that you had. Through your spiritual journey, through your healing process, I'm going to ask the tough question.
I know what's coming. But
where are you at the forgiveness stage? Were you able to forgive this man?
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask me that.
Tough question, I understand. Yeah.
I'll give you an honest answer, but then I will qualify it.
Okay.
Have I forgiven him? No.
Okay.
Will I ever? Shannon, I don't know. I will have to stand before God someday, and he's going to ask me that same question. And if I tell him no, he's probably not going to be real happy with it. So let's just say I'm a work in progress.
Okay. All right.
27 years, and no, I have not. And will I in the future? I'm struggling with that. I pray about that issue of forgiveness, in my life. I'm not there. I don't know. But I will tell you this, though, in a little bit of fairness to me. for years, he dominated my life. Basically, he controlled my life because I was obsessed with him. I was obsessed with either taking justice out on him myself, which at one time I would have done, or at least seeing the system make him pay, which it is now. So I have some solace, and I have softened quite a bit, at least from the standpoint, I don't let my feelings for him rule my life. At this point, he's an insignificant, little pathetic creature rattling around in a little 8x10 cage, 23 hours a day out of 24, and I'm content to leave it there. Now, to go the full measure of my Christian faith and to demonstrate the forgiveness, I struggle with that, Shannon, so I can't say
That's fair.
that I have will or not. But it's very much a part of my mind. And the older I get, probably the bigger issue it becomes, because, as we get older, we realize that, we're on this earth on this short period of time. We think about how we live our lives a little bit.
Yeah. And the forgiveness part is very difficult. When I lost my son, and of course, he died in a car accident. Okay, so it wasn't as tragic. It wasn't as violent. That's the word I should use. It wasn't as violent as your mother's death. And the young lady that was driving the car, it was difficult for me to forgive her because I felt like it was her fault. I needed somebody to blame.
Well, yeah.
And then I got to the point, because of my faith and because of my religion, I realized that forgiving her wasn't for her, it was for me. Because, like you, she consumed me. It was like, what was she thinking? Why hasn't she contacted me? I mean, it was just a constant thought about her, and I had to let that go. And not to say that you should be doing that. I mean, like you said, you're a work in process. You have to pray. You have to ask God for guidance, and hopefully someday you'll get to that point. I'm just sharing how the forgiveness on my part, when it came to my son, it was a comfort to me because I let that go. And I can focus on my son and remembering him and bringing peace to myself. And I'm just sharing that with you, because it may be something that you think about.
I do appreciate that. And, like I said, even though it doesn't really address the bigger issue, the fact is that I have, at least released some of my hostilities to the point that I don't obsess over him and let him control my life. So in that parallel issue, I do understand what you're saying. Not the same degree of what you demonstrated, but at least that I'm aware of it, and I do see that there is some cleansing that comes from that.
Yes. Now, there has been a movie made about the B.T.K. killer. At that time, there was all kind of press coverage. You couldn't get away from it in the news.
Right.
Were you following all of that, or did you sort of separate yourself from that? Were you following when they had the movie out and, all the news about it? How did you deal with that?
Actually, from the time they caught him in February until he was sentenced in August, that 6 months was consumed with media because I had more requests for interviews than I could count. I mean, literally dozens. And so I did have a significant amount of time to be able to, because of the interview process and doing the interviews, it helped me process the whole issue better because I could, talk to people back and forth, get some catharsis from having those discussions. So yeah, I have felt that media presence. Since then, I know there's a movie, kind of grade B stuff, and I was aware, and I watched, and I still watch today, when these things come out, because just from an ex-law enforcement psychologist perspective, it's a very interesting case study, as putting my feelings aside. So yes, I do pay attention to that. Again, not obsessed by it, but I do. In fact, to tell you the truth, supposedly in the next couple of months, I did an interview back in January in Wichita with the Oxygen Network, and they have a feature on there that's called Snapped, and it's profiles of violent criminals.
Yeah.
Come back and do a piece on Dennis Rader, and they were wonderful people to work with, and I'm really hoping that will come out, because I referenced the book in that piece, and I'm hoping that will air with that in there, because I desperately want to get this story out there. My priorities are to get it in the hands of the people who need it, and there's so many of those, and make my testament or my tribute to my mother what I want it to be, and that's basically my life's mission at this point in time, to get that book out there. And the problem being, I'm nobody. I mean, I have no name recognition, and I'm not some politician who can be on TV and push their book and everybody's happy. I have to do it just through people like you, word of mouth, grassroots. But we have a lot of power. We have a lot of influence.
Yes, we do.
In our sphere of influence, and that's why I was thrilled to talk to you. I don't know what we need to do because of this, but it got in one person's hands today, and somebody got something out of that. My mission's accomplished, because here's the way I look at it. My mother's gone, and the last vestige I have of her, like you and your son, is her headstone at the cemetery. But every time somebody picks that book up, reads that book, and gets something out of it, my mother's memory lives on, and that's what my life's all about right now.
Okay, audience, I've posted a picture of his book, The Shadow of Evil, Where's God in a Violent World? It is available on Amazon. I am currently halfway through the book. It is a very good read. I recommend it. Even if you don't have anyone that has been a victim of murder, or you haven't had that situation, we all lost somebody near and dear to us, and this book is a phenomenal read. So I do recommend it. Pick it up and let's support Jeff and get this book out there, because he provides a lot of great information in this book.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Tell me, from a spiritual perspective, you talk about how your religion and your beliefs in God helped you through this process. What would you tell someone who today is finding out that someone they love was violently murdered? Because we know they're going to go through the emotions. You have to go through the grief process. You have to go through the anger. You have to go through the sadness. You're going to go through those emotions. But what would you tell them to help them understand that there's hope, there's light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to the recovery process?
Great question. I mean, that's why I wrote the book. So you hit the nail on the head. I'm brutally honest in one respect, because I'm a cynical ex-cop, and I've seen, what life's about from the dirtiest of angles. And probably my initial comment would be, I hate to be the one to tell you, but you're in for the fight of your life right now, the emotional, spiritual fight of your life. Just as if cancer patients find out they got cancer, they're in for the physical fight of their life. So that's the bad news. It's probably going to be the toughest road that you'll ever hoe in your entire existence. But because I have been at that absolute depth of despair, hopeless, helpless, confused, abysmal, emotional, spiritual place, I am living proof, as one who just was that far away from walking away from his entire faith and everything that I've been for a lifetime, because I got that close, but I didn't succumb. I can say to those people, but in spite of how bad it is not hopeless. You think it is, but it's not hopeless. And that through the support of your friends, through the support of the church, through your own faith, and the tough battles you have to fight within yourself, you can survive. And not only survive, you can become a changed and more effective person. Because unfortunately, You gotta eat that. You gotta swallow that grief, chew it up, and swallow it, and it'll be the hardest thing you'll ever do in your life. But if you don't, you can't run from those emotions forever. They will come. They will find you sooner or later, and they're going to come out in the worst possible way. And that could look at alcoholism, drugs. It could be anything. It could be everything. But those emotions won't be denied. So you have to accept them. You have to fight through them. But in so doing, keeping your faith, keeping your loved ones close, keeping your support group, helping you keep your feet on the path, all your connections with your peers that have been through that in your support groups. That's what they're for, is to talk us all through all this. And that, again, I'm an example that I've been through the fire. I've come down that horrible, lonely road. I've come back up on the other side. And yes, I'm burned, I'm scarred in every way, and I will never be the same, and nor will I ever see my mother in this lifetime, and that causes me unending grief. Okay, all that said, but I have resumed a life of some normalcy.
Yes.
I still have my faith. I still have my emotional health, and I can still function in this world in a relative, productive, positive manner. I still have a life. I still have my kids. I still have all the gifts that God gave me, for which I'm grateful. That doesn't make up for losing your son. It doesn't make up for losing my mother. That hurts there, and it's going to hurt till the day we die.
Yes.
You and I and the others that have chosen, we're going to overcome this. We're going to be better people because of that, and we're going to be better people, maybe not because we think we are, but we're going to be better people for the sake of those who we've lost, and we're going to make them proud. And the way we make them proud is to go on and do the best we can, not give up and just jump into the black hole of emotional loss and say, I'm done, I'm finished. And that would be my message. It'd be the most difficult trial they'll ever have in their life, but it definitely can still be something positive.
That's wonderful. And Jeff, thank you so much for opening up and sharing such a personal testimony. I've enjoyed listening to you. I'm almost finished your book. I really enjoyed your book. Your book was truly an inspiration to me. What I would love, sorry, say that again.
You help me get it out there okay?
What I like to do is also, I actually run a local support group for parents that have lost their children. It's part of the Bereaved Parents of the USA. And I'm actually branching off and doing because what I find is a lot of people don't like to come to the support groups, but they'll reach out to me on Facebook to talk. So I'm going to start a private group for parents that have lost their children and others that are going through the grieving process, and I'm going to do some live sessions, and I would love for you to come and join us and talk about your book on that platform once I get it up and running.
Well, I will.
Okay, all right, I'm looking forward to that. Well, Jeff, go ahead.
You're a joy to work with. You're very well.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I apologize on my end for the technical problems, but you can tell I'm old.
No, listen, we got the important stuff out, the difficulties. I'm sure the audience, hopefully they bared with us and we got through it. But it was a joy to have you, and thank you so much. And I will be in touch with you, and I wish you Godspeed.
You too, dear. God bless.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you all for your time. I appreciate it. Bye.
All right.
Bye, dear.
I hope you guys enjoyed that episode, and I do apologize for the technical difficulties at first, but we were still able to get some great information from Jeff. Join me for my next episode. We're going to have Nancy Hartwell. For those that are not familiar with Nancy, she is the author of a series of books on human trafficking. The U.S. Department of State estimates over 600 to 800,000 people are trafficked across international borders every year. She's going to join us to talk about this. She has done some phenomenal research, and she's going to share what she knows about this horrible thing that's going on. It's basically modern day slavery. You would think at this day and age, how is this happening? But it is happening. It's happening in our own backyards. So once we get a time frame set, because I'm waiting for her to pick the correct time that we can do this interview, we will have Nancy Hartwell talk about human trafficking. Until then, I hope you guys have a blessed day, and until the next episode of Visionaries Talk Back, I am your host, Shannon, and God bless and thank you for joining us.